Oh, we are webcasting. Really? Good grief. Hi. All right. So, my colleague Adrian here has worked with institutions from many different countries to talk about how we measure and how we visualize learning outcomes. One of the conversations we were having yesterday was, well, there are two approaches to this. There's a juried approach and what they call the primary approach. And the juried approach is very much the institution level helicopter view, as I think you called it yesterday, of looking at a program across a number of courses and trying to identify where there might be issues of students attaining a certain degree of, let's use the word competency without talking about competencies, but students achieving a certain level throughout a program and using information from, let's say, reports to start feeding back into the program to improve the programmatic outcomes. Okay, so we're talking about a high-level, sort of institution-level conversation, but also we have a tool that I'll introduce a little later on that talks more to the course level as well. There are, and I'm very aware that each of you is coming from a different institution, and each of your institutions will look at assessment, will look at the structure of programs or courses very differently. So this is why for today's presentation and discussion, I'm going to take one basis. We'll have a Q&A session later on, but if you have comments and questions or during, you know, bring it on. There is a spare microphone down here as well, which I may throw around, not literally throw, because it is made of metal and quite heavy. Okay, so let's kick off. First of all, I'm just going to introduce very briefly what is Blackboard Learn SAS, because Blackboard Learn SAS is now our let's say our standard and preferred even delivery model for Blackboard Learn. And then we'll also talk about one assessment and evaluation, or assessment evaluation process, and we'll look at some of the visualizations of learning outcomes and outcome performance that you can see out of the box. So this is when you license Blackboard Learn, it comes with the core package. But we'll also look at some extension options, okay? So very, very briefly, I won't go into too much detail on this, but very, very briefly, what is Blackboard Learn SAS? So for years, we have delivered Blackboard Learn first as a self-hosted option, which institutions hosted in on their own servers. And that was a lot of effort for the institution to maintain not just the software, but also the hardware as well. And now we're delivering on a SaaS platform. Now the SaaS platform is using Amazon Web Services. We have the benefit of delivering via Amazon Web Services, which gives us the latest technology stack. And it also means a single version, continuously updated. So we're looking at a monthly release cadence. So instead of doing these twice a year or once a year, huge upgrades, we're looking at incremental upgrades or incremental delivery of new feature and function every month, which is a great benefit, I think, for end clients. And we also have the option, and this is an option, to enable the Ultra experience. So many clients move to the SaaS environment, have been using the original environment for years, and want to continue using that original interface. Absolutely no problem. There is the option to enable the Ultra interface, and you've seen the Ultra interface today in some of the keynote presentations, okay? But this is just a rough overview of the SaaS platform, and what we'll be talking about today are some solutions that exist currently within the SaaS environment, and also as extension options for that SaaS environment as well, okay? Now, Blackboard's approaches to measuring learning outcomes. This isn't our only approach, but this is one use case scenario. And I was speaking with our consultant from the US, and this is a very US model, but I was speaking with our consultant from the US, and I was saying, what is it that an institution would need to do before they start using technology? It's not that you buy technology and immediately you start to report on learning outcomes. Before you start to use the technology, you need to start with a few key points. The 3 questions she came up with as things you might want to consider before you start using technology. Where are students struggling? Where are they doing well? And so how can we improve that experience? Are the programs the best they can be? And then thirdly, are we meeting the evolving learner and market needs? So on this basis, in my next slide, I have a bit more of a process to introduce to you. Okay? So before technology, what is it that you need to introduce? And her suggestions were, first, the definition of program learning outcomes. And she recommended between 5 to 8 per program, and those could be quite broad learning outcomes. So something that you hope the student is able to do by the end of a program of study. And she also recommended that if you're starting out with an outcomes-based learning approach, you start out with maybe one course or one program, not all of them immediately. Okay, so start with a simpler approach, baby steps, step by step. Okay, it's anybody here at the moment conducting some sort of outcomes-based learning approach? Aslina, you are. Okay, Esther as well. And how far down the path are you? Do you think? Are you starting to pull data out, or a different department? Okay, understood. Okay, so these program learning outcomes are high-level abilities, skills, proficiencies, something you want the students to be able to demonstrate by the end of the program. She also suggests you create a measurement rubric for each of the PLOs, not a grading rubric, a measurement rubric. I think that's a slightly separate topic here, but that's okay. These are her suggestions, and she's the one who's been working in this learning outcomes area of higher education for many, many years. The next stage after you've identified your program learning outcomes is to start looking at your curriculum map and to start mapping those learning outcomes to, and this was the interesting point, she's not suggesting that you create new assessments in the program to measure these learning outcomes. She's suggesting that you look at existing assessments that already are measuring these learning outcomes, and you start to make this link between those learning outcomes and those assessments. Okay, so we're starting to measure the student's capabilities with relationship to those learning outcomes. And this next one is an interesting one, the program committees. In this model, this juried model, the idea is to provide some sort of feedback into the program courses that allows for programmatic improvement via course improvement. Okay? So trying to identify which courses are or are not supporting those program level learning outcomes to a high level, and perhaps making changes to those courses to thereby improve the overall learning outcomes. Okay? So this program committee and this committee member we'll be thinking about a little later on today might have 1 or 2 or 3 members depending, and may be responsible for either collecting and providing data to a committee, or they may be part of the committee themselves. Okay? So I just wanted to make clear that what we're talking about is a process that's used quite widely in America, and it may or may not be applicable to your institution at the moment, but that's something we can discuss a little later on today. Okay, so moving on. We're going to move into a demonstration from now on, and we'll move into a demonstration environment. What I want to show you are listed up on the left here is something that we call goal alignment within the system. So these program level learning outcomes that you've created on paper and you've mapped via your curriculum map to the course level assessments, we need to put those into the Blackboard Learn system in order to be able to measure them with assessments in Blackboard Learn. So we're looking at goal alignment to assessments. We're going to be looking at course performance reports. And this talks about student performance in a course against this goal set. We'll also be looking at course rubric reports. The use of rubrics is a very popular topic, although many people say it's a very difficult topic as well. But many people are using rubrics for grading within a course. And we'll look at how to visualize, extract the data on that grading rubric to feed back into the system, let's say. We'll be looking at course attempt test attempt statistics and how you can pull out very useful, very meaningful data from a Blackboard Learn course to enable you to review that test for its efficacy as a test and as a measure of student learning outcomes. The test item analysis, and then we'll look at extension options as well. Okay, so I'll end up the slides there. There we go, that's a different topic. Okay, so what I'm into at the moment, and you'll see today I'm going to be using the original course view, as we don't have a huge amount of time, but we're also able to achieve some of these within the Ultra course view. Okay, some of these reports and some of these visualizations, but there are additional reports and visualizations in the Ultra course view that we will also need to cover. So first of all, let's have a look inside this Learn environment, and I'm a goals manager, so I'm going to go into my goals and assessments area. If I was the system admin, up at the top I would go to my admin panel and to the goals area in the tools menu. Now what we see here is the goals area. Has anyone actually seen this before in your own instance of Learn? You have? Have you tried using, maybe? Okay. So what this allows you to do is to create what we term goals, which are your learning outcomes, whether they be institution level, program level, or even course level learning outcomes, to be able to create a set of these and to be able to create subsets and then define with more detail what those individual goals are. But we may find that such as this one is quite an involved description of a learning outcome. So in order to make that more specific, you can create, let me just show you here, you can create child goals. So you can create a child goal there, which can be a more specific descriptor of a single skill related to that learning outcome. Okay? So this is something that the system administrators would create into the system at the admin level, and then we need to start mapping these learning outcomes to a course level. So now we have our learning outcomes created within the system. We're going to start linking them to the course level. And if I go to a set that I'll be using quite a lot today in the demonstration, here I have my general education institutional learning outcomes. And beneath, on this, you won't be able to see this, but this is a link mark. And if I click on that link mark, I can see the courses that I have aligned these goals to. So I have this goals created in my system, and I want to relate them to individual courses. And here I can see that these goals, this set, has been linked to this biology course here. And I can go ahead and link this to multiple courses if I wish. Okay. So now thinking about down to the course level. And let me go into that biology course. And this is an interface you'll all be very familiar with, so I think we won't need too much explanation about what we're looking at, but in the Tools menu on the left-hand side, if I, as an instructor, clicked onto Goals, then I can see that this is the linked set of outcomes that has come from that administrator's or goal manager's panel. And this is now available in my course to be linked again further to student assessment items. Now, I can add additional goals that have been made available in that goals panel area. But let me take an example of some assessment items and scroll down just a little bit. And here we can see an assessment or assignment that has had some of those learning outcomes linked directly to the assignment at the assignment level. And you can see here there's a mark that suggests that this is not available or visible to students, but I can choose to make this visible to students as well. Instructor choice, perhaps, as to whether they want the students to know which of the learning outcomes they're working towards or not. Okay, so that's a very easy setting to change, and when you're defining the assignment itself, that's one of the choices you have, visibility or non-visible. Okay, so here we have an assignment that has learning outcomes aligned to it. And we also have a biology test as well that has learning outcomes aligned to individual test questions. Okay. Okay, so let's imagine that we have the assessments. They are now linked to those learning objectives we defined earlier on. And we want to start looking at student performance against this. The first place, I think, to start is actually the grade center. And when we go into the grade center, I'll go into the full grade center here. This may be a setting that you're using currently yourselves, is we have a kind of heat map of student performance already set up. So for the instructor at a course level, certainly you want to know which students are performing well. Are they performing overall quite well in an assessment or not? And those students who are getting above an agreed target will be in the green, not so well in a yellow, poorly into a red color. So that's a very quick and easy way to recognize how students are performing against certain assessments. But I mentioned earlier on about a rubric report, and this assignment, the written assignment, has been graded using a grading rubric. Still in the grade center, if I click on the chevron here, I can find something called the Rubric Evaluation Report. Is this something that any of you have run before? You've seen, okay. So the Rubric Evaluation Report is actually one of the lesser known reports, I think, in Blackboard Learn, but a very valuable one. So let me run that report right now and show you an example of the information that you can bring out from the system. So I have an option of format, how I want this report data to represent, HTML, Excel, Word, or PDF. I'll just go for the PDF option at the moment. I can choose the start and end date range, which I want to limit this to. So I'll go ahead and submit and get that report. And here I have it. Okay, so I can see it's the ISL writing assessment rubric, and I can see the overall performance. So this is the average overall performance in that assessment. And then I can see, broken down by the rubric criteria, what is the possible score for that rubric criteria, the possible maximum score, and what is the student average in the class. And as I run further down, you'll get a breakdown of the statistics from that rubric. So this is one of the core tools that comes with Blackboard Learn that, like I say, I don't think many people have always been aware of this report, but it's there, it's available for you now if you're using Blackboard Learn. And using this from multiple courses, perhaps in an Excel format, downloading that and merging that data, if you're using the same grading rubric across courses, could perhaps give you some insight into student performance in assessments in those courses. Okay. I won't spend too long on this because, like I say, we're fairly limited for time. I wanted to move back again to the, oops, wrong one, my apologies, to the grade center. And focus now on the test. So we had a quiz item. I only have 3 students in here, but I have a quiz item here. What I'm going to do is view the attempt statistics. Again, this is part of the core of the product, so the core functionality of the product. So running the attempt statistics, we can look at each question and we can see which one of these questions has been chosen as the answer by how many students, and which was the right and which was the wrong. This is useful. However, there is a more useful report that we can run here, and that's the item analysis. So the item analysis tool will start to give you a better breakdown of student reactions to questions, not just whether they got it correct or not, but it will also start to flag, for example, which of the questions within your test may need to be revised based upon the student responses to those questions. So again, another report that's available now within Learn. So any comments or questions so far, just before we move on with this? I know it's a bit of a dash through quite quickly. No? We're good? Okay, great. Okay, so what we've covered so far are the tools available within the core tool. And what I'm going to introduce to you now is something called the EAC Visualization. And this is an extension on top of the core product. This is an extension option. And still staying on the topic of rubrics and test performance, let's imagine that you're not just the instructor of one course, because what I've showed you up until now is data that one instructor can pull from one course. Let's just say that you would like to look at the data from across a variety of courses where the same assignment or assessment has been given. Okay, so licensing the EAC tool, if I click on this, it's going to open a separate link for me, and this opens into the EAC visualization tool. Okay, so I'm going to, that was already there. Let me just set my date range again. Slow. There we go. Okay. So I can see for one that these are the goals I'm looking at across the range of courses. And once I click into the rubrics area, what I get to see is where rubrics have been used in the courses I'm monitoring to grade assignments. And I would like to dig down a little further into the performance against some of these rubrics. So once I click on the rubric I'd like to focus on, that highlights all of those rubrics with the same name, but not all of the assignments are the same. So I'm going to focus on the analysis essay. So let's remove the discovery paper, remove the community project, and keep all of the analysis essays. So straight away what I can see is a list of the courses where this analysis essay has been used. I go and view the statistics. That gives a similar statistics report to the one we saw earlier on. But this is related to the rubric and the student rubric performance. And perhaps more interestingly is the row analysis. So I can see for each of the criteria for that rubric that has been used maybe across courses or in a single course multiple times, I can see the averages here about student performance against that rubric. But if I'm looking at the student row, oops, there we go. And then we can get another visual breakdown of student performance against those rubric criteria. And then I'm looking at the performance in relation to those goals as well, because the rubric is actually aligned to those goals at a criteria level. So this is let's say an extension software, not part of the core product of Learn, but plugs in to Blackboard Learn and offers you the ability to dig further into student performance in assignments where a rubric has been used as a grading rubric. And it's not limiting you to one course. It gives you the opportunity to look at the student performance in multiple courses. Okay. Looking back again at a slightly different course, we're going to take a look at a test. And once again, instead of just, yes, Esther. With this tool, I do not think so. Let me just return to that. Just 1 second. That's all right. Okay, so I can choose a specific learning outcome, for example, and see which of the assessment items have been linked to that specific learning outcome. That's one option. We also do get some information on performance against that specific learning outcome from those rubric graded assignments. If that provides some of the information, I'm not sure you'd be able to see that particularly well. Yep. But I think I'm understanding correct. You'd like to see perhaps more information, choosing a specific learning outcome and seeing a map of all of the assessments that are being covered by that specific learning outcome. There is a report in the first goals area I showed you that does show you a kind of map about how those goals are being used within the system. and that's part of the core system itself. So happy to follow up on that with you later. And whether this tool, okay. It may be that there is an option that I'm not aware of on here, but that may also take some different settings as well. Okay, so we can sit down with this a little later on. We'll be on the booth, absolutely no problem. Yikes. So I'm actually coming up to time. This went a little faster than I'd hoped, well, than I thought it would. So I'd encourage anyone with questions to actually start pinging questions out now on the fly. If there's something that you've seen that you'd like to know more about, then please come and find us on the booth downstairs. We can run through this with you over the next day and a half. That's absolutely no problem. Yes, Haslina. Yes. Well, as you mentioned at the beginning, you're already doing something, but you're just not using this system. So there's nothing to stop you from using your existing mappings and just recreating that in the Blackboard Learn environment, I think. And it's almost like you've done the preparation already. I suspect it may be quite a little bit of work. There may be ways of doing that by copying courses over with a certain configuration, with a certain bunch of mappings available if you have. Yeah, if you have the rubrics already in there, if you have the goals into the framework that I showed you at the beginning, then you can start making that direct alignment to the rubrics themselves. That's possible. So you might just be doing a bit of reverse engineering. Okay, well, it's still workable, I think. At least you have that preparation done. You know which assessments that you would like to link those learning outcomes to. And maybe that's half the battle. I hope so. So thinking positively, it may be something that you can do. What I was going to, I really am coming up to time. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm afraid, is begin to close down. Yikes. And I won't bother going presenter mode again. I'll just finish off with a couple of slides. We have a consulting division within Blackboard that has worked with clients in many different regions to help them achieve the most effective, let's say, learning outcomes assessment program for their institutions. It's not always using the tool that I've shown you today. There might be a different option of doing it. But certainly they also help with the type of work that you're talking about at the moment, which is the planning out of which to map where and how to structure. Okay, so their process and their thinking around the measurement and visualization of learning outcomes is that it's 80% academic decisions and 20% technology. The technology enables those decisions, but the work needs to be put in beforehand to decide how this is going to be measured. Um, so as a very, very brief summary, as I'll have to move on fairly quickly, we've looked at a suggestion for one possible method of measuring learning outcomes. All of those reports that we've looked at in the system today can be provided to a program review committee, which can then suggest on course level adjustments, which hopefully will go towards the improvement of program level learning outcomes. We've presented a few examples of visualizations of the data of student performance related to learning outcomes, and we've had a look at a few of the core functionalities available in your existing learning management system. But I've also demonstrated one additional capability that is an additional extension building block that gives a slightly deeper functionality. So with that, I will call time on this, and I will ask you if you do have questions, something you would like to follow up on after the session, then please come and join us down on the booth outside of the main hall, and we're there today and tomorrow, and happy to spend a little more time talking through any of the solutions, and perhaps one or two that we weren't able to show today. Okay, thank you very much.